Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Star Trek Discovery Season 3 Episode 6 Scavengers. This video is part of a series of videos where I cover episodes of Star Trek Discovery, so I'll have to start with a spoiler warning for Star Trek Discovery up to Season 3 Episode 6. If you haven't seen up to this point, you will not want to watch this video, otherwise some things will be spoiled for you. So, this episode was fine. It was fine. Yeah, it was fine. I mean, I was saying before that every episode was better than the last. Like, episode 2 was better than episode 1, episode 3 was better than episode 2, episode 4 was better than episode 3, and episode 5 was better than episode 4. But that chain is now broken with this episode, which I think is not as good as the past couple episodes. This is probably as good as like episode 1, maybe a little bit better, but I don't think as good as episode 2. But it's hard to, I don't know. It's hard for me. It's kind of splitting hairs for me to compare. It's just not as good as the last 3 episodes. That's all I'll say. It was fine. It actually reminded me of episode 1 in a lot of ways, mainly because it was kind of generic. It's like they kind of, like, that's what I thought of episode 1. It was a very generic, oh, there's this adventure, and here's this generic fight scene, and here's this Han Solo character. And I guess it's, and I don't think it's because they brought back Book, who, to be clear, I actually think is a good character. I actually like him. I was glad to see him again. But it seems like whenever he appears, they have to do this generic stuff, where here's a generic prison break, basically. It remind you of any sort of generic action adventure or sci-fi show, or Star Trek shows have done this before. Kind of reminded me of the Homecoming episode from Deep Space Nine, where Karen O'Brien broke a bunch of Bajorans out of a Cardassian occupation. But that's just one of very, very many examples it reminded me of. Yeah, there wasn't much more to that storyline, to be frank. It was a simple, and I don't think it was done particularly well. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't think it was done horribly. Like, it wasn't bad. I don't think it was like, oh my god, I can't watch this. This is so horrible. I just think of more of, yeah, this is more of the same. It's kind of, it's familiar. I've seen this before, but of course the context and the specifics are all different. Now, for example, the Andorian guy, who I didn't even bother to learn his name, and I don't think I'm going to, who was kind of friends with Book. Like, I think, like, they just kind of exposition dumped his backstory, like, very fast, in, like, one line of dialogue, so I didn't even pick up entirely what the deal with him was, and to be quite frank, I don't care. Because, I mean, what I got from him is that he was forced, like, through the threat of the death of his family by the, the big bad guys. Who's the boss? It was sounding like an Egyptian god, Osiris or something. I don't know, but whoever the big, scary Orion boss is of this particular territory, threatened to, like, kill him and his family or whatever, so he had to betray Book and the others still hold it against him, like, fuck you for betraying us, and he kind of redeems himself by helping them all escape. Yeah, so that's the gist of what I got. I don't know, maybe someone will tell me I got some of the details wrong, but again, don't care, because the episode didn't make me want to care. Make me want to care. It just seemed like a generic plot thread that they just quickly threw out there, and like this quick exposition. And I did not give a fuck about this character. Like, when he got shot, and at the end they were trying, oh, we gotta save his life, and oh my god, and Book risked his life to save him. And of course they did the generic thing where he pushed Book out of the way and took to prove that he's actually a really good guy because he betrayed them before. It was all really rushed through. And that's why I don't care. It was all very generic. They didn't spend enough time. We didn't get to know them. So it's just a generic, scenario that we've seen 1,000 times before. And it's just all very sort of familiar and generic. Sorry to keep saying that word, but I think it's what describes it best. Now, so when he was dying and all that, I really did not care. And I really don't care if we never see this character again. fact, I probably prefer that we not, because there's nothing interesting about him. I'm sorry. And I've never been shy about saying I'm not a huge fan of Giorgio. I think the whole, in Mirror Universe Empress thing, she just feels kind of out of place. And I never really got a strong handle on her relationship with Burnham, so I wasn't that. Yeah, I never hated it, but I'm just not that attached to it, so it wasn't a very strong through storyline for their connection. Although it's sometimes cool to see her in action. Like Michelle Yeoh is always a great actress, of course, and it was good seeing her sort of get the better of these Orion asshole types and sort of go head to head with them and being assholes to them, which was pretty cool, and her snarky attitude. But the whole thing with where she's like suffering, whatever. It must have to do with her talk with Cronenberg in the previous episode. I don't know if it does or it started before that, but it seems that he had done something to her that's causing her to be like all paralyzed, whatever. And again, I'm not very incredibly interested in this storyline either, to be honest. So to me, what was more interesting about this episode was actually the stuff with Starfleet, because as I said, I really like the way they handled this new Starfleet. I'm really more interested and curious to see what this is like. It was just interesting to see Saru at the meeting and being integrated into, and how they updated the ship with more modern technology, which makes all the sense in the world. If they're going to use a 1,000-year-old ship, at least the least they can do is upgrade it. And so I kind of forgot that the discoveries from the 23rd century, not the 24th, because when they're talking about how the comm badges are communicators, like the crew was acting like, oh my god, and I was like, what? Of course they're communicators. But then I had to realize that that's a next generation era thing, 24th century thing. In the 23rd century, the comm badges weren't communicators. I'm like, oh, because they had still had those flip phones. Kirk to Enterprise type thing. So I was like, oh yeah, that's right. And of course they did more than just being communicators. They can bring up their tricorders, and you can bring up these 3-dimensional screens. And that made all the sense in the world to me. And that was also really cool. I enjoyed that. And I really liked the reoccurring joke of Linus just randomly appearing in random places because he can't figure out how to use it correctly. It seems like, I don't know, I really like Linus. He seems like the most successful of these side characters so far, to be frank, and it's probably because he doesn't appear that much. When he does, he seems to have I have more of a handle on Linus's character than I do on Detmer's or some of these others, to be frank, or whoever that random communications guy. I haven't even learned their names yet. That's how kind of generic they've been so far. Whereas Linus is pretty unique and pretty easy to get a hold of. I predict that he's going to be becoming more prominent as the show goes on. But I thought that was a really funny joke. That was really effective, especially towards the end when they had the Book and Burnham were about the kiss, and he just appears out of nowhere and be like, "Oh, this isn't the lab." That's funny. I like it. And as far as Burnham and Book kissing, yeah, come on, no one's surprised by this. This is a million miles away. It's so obvious. I mean, yeah, but yeah, I don't hate it. But it's predictable, so I'm not just whatever, just a generic love story. I don't really have much interest in it either. So yeah, that was all cool. The stuff with Adira, at least they established Adira, because she didn't really appear in the next episode, so I wasn't even sure if she was still on Discovery, but this episode makes it clear that she is. And you see her interactions with Stamets, which I thought were okay. It's decent character interactions. I wasn't blown away by it, but it's good character building stuff where he sees her talking to her dead boyfriend or whatever, and she explains it to him, and he's all okay with that. And she helps him remove the little things on his wrist which hurt him, and use the new 30-second century technology, so he can just integrate with the spore drive. I think the next step would be to give someone else tardigrade DNA, so Stamets isn't the only one. I mean, they kind of touched on this earlier. I mean, before they were trying to find out some other way to operate the spore drive, but why don't they just give someone else? I guess because, it's too illegal to genetically. But, I mean, come on. At this stage, after the burn, I mean, if they're still... I know Stamets did it, I don't know. That's just my thinking on it, but it doesn't look like they're going to go in that direction, even though that would make all the sense in the world to me. Anyway, so yeah, that stuff was cool. That was okay. And I will say, Saru demoting Burnham made all the sense in the world. And I kind of thought when she first became first officer that she wouldn't be a particularly good first officer because she's too independent, does her own thing. And I kind of predicted that she would break the rules in some way that would piss Saru off or hurt him in some way. And I did like how the Admiral kind of pointed out to Saru, is like, you should have just told me about this intel, because maybe I would have approved the mission, maybe not. I mean, you kind of just kept it to yourself. Is not that, because Saru at the same time was a bit too dismissive of her. But he's keeping on her board, like when he said, I'm going to relieve you of duty, I thought, he's relieving her of duty. But no, he's saying to relieve you of your first officer duties. So you're still got everything else. You're still a chief science officer. You're just not the first officer anymore. So that's kind of lenient of him. And I think he recognizes that she's still valuable to the crew, just not in the first officer role, which, to be frank, I could kind of see that she was not really first officer material. I do wonder who is going to become the first officer, because none of the main characters really fit. Like, Tilly's too young. Stamets is more the spore drive guy. Culber's a doctor. Jet Reno's an engineer. So it seems like it would have to be one of those generic people whose names I don't even know. Like that one woman who was the actress who played Ariam. I don't even know her name. She was actually in command of the bridge a couple times, so maybe she'll become the first officer. Either way, it's going to be some generic person. I hope they do give that role to someone and not just leave it empty. That would kind of really annoy me. But we'll see. Maybe Burnham will earn it again, and that will be part of her season 3 story arc, which I would be fine with. That would be... that would be just fine with me. Anyway, so yeah, I don't know if I have anything else to say about that, other than that scene where Saru demoted Burnham was way too melodramatic. And this is the difference between Discovery and other Star Treks. And I said this Discovery is always way too melodramatic, because we had scenes with other officers having to demote other officers, and it's been emotional, like when Jellicoe relieved Riker of duty. That was really an emotionally charged, like, really good scene, but I wouldn't describe it as melodramatic. And same with, like, you had other stuff with Picard or other specific situations where you had disagreements, arguments between commanding officers and the first officers, and I would say they were emotionally charged and well handled. But this one in particular just felt a bit melodramatic, like they were going too sort of emotional on it, if you know what I'm saying. Because they're almost in tears, and Burnham's like, he's doing the right thing, and Saru's... And this is the first time I ever noticed Saru's like swaying his arms back and forth as he walks. Has he always done that, or did I just never noticed that before? Or is that just a thing here because he's sad? I don't know. But anyway, he's like, I'm sorry, I don't want to do this. I'm like, just, come on. Bring the melodrama down a bit. I mean, they should actually study some of these other Star Trek scenes, like the Jellicoe thing and other things that were emotionally charged, for sure, but they didn't feel overly melodramatic to a fake level the way that this scene felt. I'm sorry, but it did. They should have been more professional about it. It should have been more about, like, for example, the time when Ro betrayed Picard and left Starfleet, because Ro was Picard's protege, who he had invested all his time with, and he wanted her to have a long-lasting career in Starfleet, and she was very promising, but she threw it all away to join the Maquis, and they were both emotional about it, but in that case, like, it felt really earned. They still handled it in a very professional manner, and like the way you had that look of devastation on Picard's face when he found this out, it was so like powerful and touching. But it didn't feel melodramatic the way that this scene felt. He wasn't like, "Oh, you're my protege, how could you do this?" and sway his arms back and forth. No, it was more sort of in his character, whereas his character's just too melodramatic. Sorry. Anyway, so my rating for Scavengers out of 10, I'm going to give this a 7. Very good. I mean, I was thinking about giving a 6, but I gave the first episode a 7. This is better than the first episode, so I guess I'll give this a 7 as well. A 7, very good. It's, as I said, it's fine. It's fine. Like, I didn't hate it. I mean, the melodrama annoys me, and the genericness is very generic. But, you know, as I said, there are decent things about, like, I love the Linus joke, I gotta say, that really worked, and, like, the new technology and whatnot, and Burnham and JoJo's, like, adventure was interesting. I didn't totally hate it. It was fine. It's fine. So this episode, fine. Anyway, that's it for my review of Scavengers. I'll be back this week and every week to cover Star Trek Discovery, and be sure to check out my channel as I cover many other Star Trek shows, as well as I cover other shows like The Expanse, Breaking Bad, and The Outer Limits. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that, and thanks a lot for watching.